So before we proceed to our next organelle, which is the mitochondria, which is known as the powerhouse of the cell, we need to understand what is the currency inside different cells of the energy. And the energy currency that we use inside cells is called ATP. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. And this molecule, which is called adenosine triphosphate, is pretty similar to something that we already know of, which is nucleic acid. Nucleic acid contains a nitrogenous base, a pentose sugar, and one phosphate group. But in our case, we have two extra phosphate groups as well. This is why it is called an adenosine triphosphate. Tri stands for 3. Now, between the second and the third phosphate groups, there is a quite not stable covalent bond because the phosphate groups are very negative and the same charge repel each other. If we have the same charge, if you remember from the analogy of the magnets, if you are going to have the same charge and try to attract them and to put them together, they are going to repel each other. And when we break the bond between the third and the second phosphate groups, we are going to release energy to the surrounding. And this process of the releasement of energy is called an Endogonic reaction, because we are releasing energy to the surrounding. Now, we have a molecule that is highly charged with a potential energy. We can use it to many different places inside our cell, and we do use it inside our cell in many different places. But if we are just going to take this molecule and break the bond randomly, we are not going to be able to use this energy, this potential energy, because we are just going to lose the energy to the surrounding. So what we do is something called coupling reactions. We couple the releasement of the energy to another reaction that requires energy. And the reaction that requires energy is called Endorgonic reaction. I'm very sorry for my very bad handwriting. Make sure to check the link in the description for the notes. So we have exergonic reaction, which is going to be coupled with an endogonic reaction. But how do we actually couple the following reactions? So if we are going to take the ATP molecule and we are going to take it and bound it to, for example, something, a molecule that requires energy, a reaction that requires energy, and we are going to lose one of the phosphate, as we said. We are going to break the phosphate, the bond between the third and second phosphates. We are going to have a free phosphate group. And this phosphate group is going to be attached to the reactants that require energy. And the phosphate group that is attached to the new reactant is basically given energy to the specific reactant. So the process of taking the ATP, breaking it, and moving the phosphate to the substrate that require the energy, which are endogonic reaction, we are basically having the coupling. And I know it's a bit complicated, so let me give you an example, a very basic example when it comes to ATP yielding and coupling reactions. We know that RNA polymerase can create RNA. It's an anabolic process. It's actually an endogonic process. We need energy in order to build bigger molecules, polymers for monomers. So what we are going to do, we are going to have a lot of ATP associated with the following structures, the RNA polymerase, in order to keep and drive the formation of the phosphodiester bonds and keep and drive the movement of the RNA polymerase and keep and drive the reaction itself. So we have the RNA polymerase, but this RNA polymerase will be also able to accept the phosphate groups from the ATP that was broken down in order to yield the energy and yield this endogonic reaction, which requires energy. Now, another important thing to mention is once we broke down ATP and we took one phosphate group away, it is going to be called ADP. And ATP stands for adenosine diphosphate. Now, adenosine diphosphate can go to specific places, especially inside the mitochondria, and it can get charged again with a new phosphate group. The charging of the new phosphate group requires energy, And we get this energy from a process of cellular respiration, which we are going to see that occurs especially inside the mitochondria and in different cells inside the cell, different sites inside the cell. But in order to go from ADP to ATP again, we are yielding energy from the food we eat. And our cells know to take the energy from the food we eat, especially glucose, and usually carbohydrates and glucose, in order to create and go through cellular respiration, which is eventually going to give us new ATP from ADP. And this process of taking ATP, using it, creating ADP, and then recycling the ADP in order to create ATP again, is a cycle motion. So it's a cycle. We have ATP, we use it, we get ADP, then we charge it and we get the ATP once again. And we charge it in many different places. We can do it inside the mitochondria, which we are going to see in the future lessons, and we can also do it in different places inside the cell, in many different techniques and pathways. I hope this video made sense, and I will see you next time.